At a big cliffhanger.
When they're walking across the bridge, then they see
They
the
are
cross.
walking across the bridge, yes. And we see. Oh wait, let's try it though. Yeah, oh, you can work on that. The professor, though, is not with the children because he wasn't able to see the
I think
bridge.
that has something to do with his age, because his imagination degrows.
So,
He's very
wait,
sensitive.
I'm still waiting. They escaped the gyroscatus and they crossed the bridge. They made it inside the doors, and standing in front of them was the croc. Part 3, Chapter 5. "You surprised me," he said. "I didn't think you'd make it." He noticed the wiffle bird in Tom's arms. "What's the matter with her?" Ben said, "She's hurt. She tried to save us, and the gyroscatus knocked her down." The proc looked dreadfully concerned and took a step forward. Tom clutched the bird protectively. "Come along, boy," the proc snapped. "Give the whipple bird to me." "Not on your life, you big bully," Tom whispered fiercely. "Oh, this is really too much." The proc stamped a long, thin foot in annoyance. "Do you realize the trouble you have caused? This is all your fault. The first accident we've had in this kingdom for a century. If you hadn't been here, none of this would have happened. You're an absolute menace." Tom was so angry that he yelled at the towering proc. "Our fault, is it? Well, that's a stupid remark. Who sent that monster out there to attack us? Who tipped off the gazooks and then the sidewinders and the swamp kaboons? Who arranged to have Lindy captured by the splinter cat? It was all your fault." The boy choked with emotion as he looked down at the feathered bundle lying so still in his arms. "If she doesn't get better, if she dies, I'll never forgive you. Never." The proc looked at Tom intently. Then he said, in a quieter voice, "I suggest you give the bird to me. We know how to take care of her. She will be all right, I promise you." Tom hesitated. Ben said, "Do as he says, Tom." The proc clapped his hands together. "Guard," he called. A large sidewinder came trundling around the corner. It looked very startled at the sight of the children. Lindy gave a squeal of fear. "You will not be harmed," the proc reassured her. He took the wiffle bird from Tom. She was whimpering with genuine pain and sounded very different from the brave bird who had pretended such agony in front of the splinter cat. "You're sure she'll be all right?" the boy asked anxiously. "You know, she was trying to save me when she got hurt." He touched her gently in farewell. "We will do our best," the proc replied gravely. He handed the bird to the sidewinder, who walked quickly away. "Now, tell me about your friend, the professor," the proc said. "Why is he not with you?" "He just couldn't get here," Lindy answered. "He was so tired and he couldn't see the bridge." "It was too far. It was too much for him," explained Ben. "He would have been all right if it hadn't been for all the things you put in our way." "He hasn't really been feeling well since we jumped off the brain strain," growled Tom. "That's when it started." "He told us to come by ourselves," said Lindy. "He said he was sure the Whangdoodle would understand and would see us." Ella and Gabby. Ella, I don't even think that's your seat, okay?
Yeah, I was sharing my phone.
It's important that we are not sharing supplies and that we are staying in our own spots. You know, those usual little things that we would love to be able to do. Unfortunately, we've got to stay in our assigned spot and not share those materials. "I see." The proc looked thoughtful, and there seemed to be a trace of disappointment in his voice. Then his expression changed, and he said briskly, Well, I'm sorry, but this is the end of your journey. I can tell you now that the Whangdoodle will not receive you. You might just as well turn around, find your professor, and go home. Oh, don't say that, Ben cried desperately. Tom said, we promised the professor that we would speak to the Whangdoodle. I've got to give him his regards, added Lindy tearfully. There's nothing I can do, said the Proc firmly, and he began to usher them towards the gates. The children hung back. Tom had never felt so depressed. I want to wait and see if the wiffle bird is going to be all right. Huge tears rolled down Lindy's face. We've worked so hard. It just can't end like this. Isn't there something you can do? The Proc was shaking his head. I'm afraid not. You see, but he didn't finish. For with a sob, Lindy rushed to his side and flung her arms around him. Oh, please, please, she begged. She buried her face in his thick, baggy sweater as she wept as if her heart would break. The Proc knelt beside her. He was distinctly uncomfortable. Now, Miss Lindy, you mustn't cry. I can't stand to see people cry. Lindy's hands stole up around his neck and she clung to him tightly. He was red in the face and covered with confusion. Ben and Tom looked at each other. It's okay, Lindy, Ben said gently. I guess it'll have to be like the professor says. Every once in a while people fail in spite of trying. He'll understand. But I don't understand, she wailed. At home, if somebody tried really hard and really wanted to see the president, they could. She gazed imploringly at the Proc. Dear Proc, couldn't you just this once forget about being in charge and that sort of thing? Couldn't you speak to the Whangdoodle for us? I want to see him more than anything in the whole world. The Proc hesitated. He looked at the boys and looked back at Lindy. He touched her tear-stained face. Oh, you human beings, he said with feeling. When will I ever learn? He rubbed Lindy's cheek with the sleeve of his sweater. Come along. I can see there's only one way to get any peace around here, and that's to let you meet the Whangdoodle. Lindy hugged him with all her strength. Tom and Ben could not believe the sudden turn of events. All right. The Proc waved away their thanks. Taking Lindy's hand, he said, Come along, Miss Lindy, but for pity's sake, try not to cry anymore. It gets me all emotional and I start to itch. He led them across the courtyard and under another archway, past 2 sentry sidewinders standing rigidly at attention. The children gave them plenty of space. The palace was more beautiful than they had ever imagined. There were crystal courtyards with bright mosaic floors. Others were grassy with wildflower borders and contained sparkling fountains or tranquil pools with ambrosia blossoms floating on the milk-white water. The trees were magnificent, and there were flowers such as the children had never seen before. Flutterbys were everywhere. There was a cool breeze, and the scent of honeysuckle was strong and heady. Wind chimes made sweet music. The Proc walked quickly down a long, vaulted passageway and paused in front of a silver door. Wait for me here, he said, and went inside. Ben, Tom, and Lindy looked at each other, their hearts pounding with excitement. The boys straightened their hair, and Lindy smoothed the wrinkles out of her clothes. She said longingly, I wish the professor were here. We must remember every detail for him, Ben declared. The silver door opened and the Proc emerged. You may come in now, he said quietly. When you meet the Whangdoodle, you must address him as Your Majesty. Don't talk too much and don't get bouncy with excitement because the Whangdoodle seldom has company and is not used to it. Remove your hats and give them to me. Always go bareheaded in front of royalty. It shows respect. The children took off their scrappy caps and gave them to the Proc. He held open the door as they walked past him, and as they walked past him, he announced in a clear voice, The Potter children, Your Majesty, Benjamin, Thomas, and Melinda. He closed the door behind them. There, they were in a cool, high-ceilinged room. It was white, with tall windows through which the sunlight fell onto a polished marble floor. The room was sparsely furnished. There was a long table bearing some choice pieces of silver and a large, richly covered chair, which was framed by a beautiful tapestry that hung on the wall behind it. There was no one in the room. The children waited. The silence lengthened. Tom coughed, and a hollow echo came from the high ceiling. Quite suddenly, a cheerful voice said, "Well, I must say, you humans have changed a bit since the old days." The children jumped with alarm and found themselves witnessing an amazing sight. 2 eyes and a very large pair of antlers began to materialize from the tapestry, followed by the moose-like head that bore them. Next came 4 rather short legs attached to a round barrel-like body. The children watched in wonder as the Whangdoodle crossed to his throne and sat down, nonchalantly folding his front legs across his chest and crossing one back leg over the other. "Don't look so surprised." His voice was deep, and he spoke with an engaging lisp. "I was playing it safe. Didn't want you to see me before. I'd had a peek at you, so I changed myself into the colors of the tapestry." The Whangdoodle was truly an extraordinary creature. He was the size of a small pony. His face was big and friendly, with large brown eyes and long, fair eyelashes. His eyebrows were arched, giving him a constant look of surprise. His muzzle looked soft as velvet, and when he grinned, he displayed strong, horse-like teeth, which protruded over his lips. His antlers were amazingly large and very handsome. He held his head proudly, in keeping with his generally regal air. His body was a warm gray-brown color, and his small, rather thin tail was fashioned into a love knot. On his hind feet, he wore a pair of old, pink-knitted bedroom slippers with floppy tassels. Ben remembered the Proc's instructions. "Your Majesty, thank you for allowing us to see you." The Proc tells me you've given him a lot of trouble. I didn't want to see you, not at first. Then I confess that I did feel some slight desire to make contact again after all these years. I do get lonely, not that I mind, and I wouldn't want to go back. Not ever, even if you begged and pleaded. Humans can't be trusted. Here, have a piece of watch. He held out a large box of candy. The children hesitated. "Come on, you must be starving. I'm sure you haven't eaten for ages." They hungrily accepted the delicious sweets. "Aren't they good?" The Whangdoodle munched one happily. "This is my favorite kind. I have a very sweet tooth, you know. Would you like to see it?" he asked Lindy. "Oh, yes, thank you, Your Majesty." The Whangdoodle grinned. "It's this one here," he said, indicating it with his tongue. "See the little daisy on it?" "Why, that is a sweet tooth," Lindy said in surprise. "Thought you'd like it. All Whangdoodles are born with one, you know." A shadow passed over his brow. "At least they used to be," he added sadly. He helped himself to another piece of watch. "As I was saying, you look different from the children I used to know. Cleaner, neater, taller. Are you an exception, or do all children look like you?" Tom answered, "I don't think we're different from other children, Your Majesty." "How is your world these days? The Proc never tells me anything because he doesn't want to upset me. Do you still use that barbaric rack and boiling oil on your enemies? Do you still fight over territory and so on?" "We still have wars, Your Majesty, if that's what you mean," Ben replied. The Whangdoodle looked depressed. "I thought so. It didn't seem as though things were going to change much when I left." He began to turn blue. Lindy said, "Your Majesty, you're changing color." "Am I?" He looked at his stomach. "So I am. I can do it. I do it without thinking, you know." "Can you really turn any color you want?" asked Ben. "Yes, I can turn plaid if I want to, but that's a hard one." "What's the hardest color of all to do?" Lindy inquired. "Oh, I would say flange." What's flange? Tom chuckled. It's nothing to laugh about, young man. It's every color of the rainbow all at once. I seldom manage that one. Mind you, omnipresent blue was pretty tough as well, and crash pink. Is that pretty? Asked Lindy. It's stunning, absolutely stunning, replied the Whangdoodle. Harder than plaid? Oh, 10 times harder. Or is it 11? Lilac is my favorite color, Lindy told him. Is it now? Well, allow me the honor. The Whangdoodle slowly turned the most beautiful shade of lilac that Lindy had ever seen. That's lovely. Thank you, Your Majesty. Not at all. Here, have some more watch. The Whangdoodle suddenly winced. Oh, dear, my poor feet. I know it's rather informal, but would you mind if I put them up for a while? I'm due for a new pair of slippers, you see, and right now my feet are killing me. Ben said, Oh, don't worry about us, Your Majesty. Is there anything we could do for you? You could pass me that footstool over there. Ben fetched it and placed it in front of the throne. I know that the bell is going to ring momentarily, so we are going to pause here.